Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is time for another show. What the hell are we doing here? Oh, yeah, right. It's Tuesday, September 17th, 2024, and therefore, time for another show. A little bit of a hectic race to the microphone today. Not that, I don't know exactly what caused it. I got distracted at the last minute by some gameplay here in KITM World Headquarters. One of those online quizzes, which are usually, not something I ordinarily would pay attention to, but this one caught my attention. I thought a rather brilliant subject. Usually I'll skip anything. What Big Bang Theory character are you? No, not actually pretty interested in that. What else? This one was, I don't know, this was an inspired sort of quiz subject. It was, what was it? You have to guess. Are there any of the following things? Are they Middle Earth characters or IKEA products? And it strikes you right away. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. It could go either way. And really, I had no idea. And I suppose if you are well versed in either the Lord of the Rings trilogy and various other Tolkien mythology or whatever you would call it, or I guess work at IKEA, or you're just constantly thumbing through the IKEA product catalog or whatever. Or you're Swedish, I suppose. That could also be it. A lot of those product names probably, to us, they're fantastical and weird sounding. And to Swedish people, it's, this says, you're asking me if the word swivel chair is a Middle Earth guy? No, it's probably not. So there are certainly population groups in the world that would be invulnerable to the powers of this quiz, but I liked it. It was pretty good, and all I could do was shout out at random, basically. So we got the score a little bit above the expected value of random guessing. So entertaining, good idea, good call. That was from Mental Floss, I think, is where that came from this morning. So if you're looking for it and you're looking to confound your friends or to remind them that not everybody shares their weird enthusiasm for those books or their foldable furniture, you could do it that way. It was fun. It was a good idea. All right. Well, let's see. It is Tuesday, and that means only one thing besides the fact that it's Tuesday. Well, if it was really only meant one thing, we'd be done. It's Tuesday, and that's all there is to it. But Tuesday, ordinarily, very frequently, speaking with Joan McCarter, I think this week, once again, circumstances conspire against us, but what we would ordinarily be talking about, of course, during her visit is the specter of government shutdown. We're going to have dramatic music for that, I think. Well done. And it is now, about 2 weeks left in the fiscal year, and no sign of any progress whatsoever, especially in the House, where the Republican conference remains divided among some 5 factions, each one with, at a minimum, just enough people to defeat any progress on anything at all that they don't like even just a little bit. So far, no progress toward actually getting anything done. My email inbox is probably full of alerts from the Hill talking about this and then trying to set the agenda for the rest of the day. Let's see. We have at least a couple of reports from the Hill because they're constantly pumping out articles about stuff like this. We have, I think I put 2 of them away, and I may have put them away in reverse chronological order. So let me try this one. There was, I think, first to publication was this piece from the 14th. So that would have been at the end of last week. We did not bother to check in with how they were failing on the government funding front. We just assumed that they were taking care of failing without our help. This one, Emily Brooks and Michael Schnell put together on the, 14th is, today's the 17th, yesterday was the 16th. So Saturday. So after the failure of the Republicans to work through their issues on Friday, GOP plays blame game after funding bill failure. There's a lot going on in that headline, and a lot of literary devices being put to use. The House GOP's inability to coalesce around a strategy to address a looming government funding deadline, is sparking a blame game among Republicans. And as you know, as Americans, we're told not to play the blame game, usually by Republicans, and usually because they're to blame for something. Anytime that there's a school shooting, let's not play the blame game. Let's instead talk about restricting 2,000 students to entering and leaving through one single door or something smart like that. The real problem is the doors. And besides, people have to have AR-15s in case bears attack the school. All right, well, where were we? Right, their inability to coalesce around a strategy to address a looming government funding deadline is sparking a blame game among Republicans, which is great, after opposition from multiple factions helped thwart Speaker Mike Johnson's strategy, if he had one, to avert a shutdown at the end of the month. I think the strategy was, let's hope everybody votes for this bill. It's a strategy, but grappling with his razor-thin House majority, Johnson opted to try the spending plan proposed by hardliners in the House Freedom Caucus, attach a conservative proposal, a bill to require proof of citizenship to vote, and then attach that to the 6-month extension of funding as an opening salvo to the Democratic-controlled Senate. Having not learned any lesson, of course, he said, well, maybe what we should do is let's try what the Freedom Caucus suggests, because they're usually standing in the way of things. Maybe if we give them what they want, everyone will go along, and then everybody realizes, actually, most of us really kind of hate the House Freedom Caucus and think they're a bunch of a-holes. So, didn't work. Former President Trump, playing into this, he has called to condition government funding on that voting bill, which does nothing because, of course, non-citizens are not allowed to vote. The Speaker, though, was forced to pull a scheduled vote on that legislation this week, by which they mean last week. Now, Republicans, frustrated with yet another legislative drama, whose fault is that, defined by GOP infighting, are pointing fingers. I'm constantly pointing fingers at those. Well, the fingers I'm pointing are usually sort of just upwards at the sky, but anyway, it's disappointing that we cannot get the majority of our own members to vote for a bill that they all support, which they don't, I guess, which is attached, and support the appropriations bill that are lower than their Democratic counterparts and are at the level that the law dictates. House Appropriations Committee Chair Tom Cole said, last week, by the way, in case you're trying to keep score at home, Tom Cole, Republican of Oklahoma, and, he's a House Appropriations Chair. A lot of people know him. I have no problem with what the Speaker is trying to do. I have a problem that members aren't supporting what the Speaker is trying, he added. Okay. Opposition to the bill came from far-flung corners of the conference. Some fiscal hawks, mostly from outside the Freedom Caucus, objected to any funding extension. Defense hawks, headlined by House Armed Services Committee Chair Mike Rogers, Alabama, were concerned about the impact the bill will have at the Pentagon, and moderates worried about a shutdown threat so close to the election. One House Republican, who requested anonymity to discuss the sensitive topic, slammed the hardliners for derailing the Speaker's negotiation tactic. Okay. I don't really understand, why. I understand that they're mad that the bill didn't pass, but he had a negotiation tactic. They had a negotiation tactic. They said what they wanted. He didn't give it to them. What were they going to do? Anyway, once again, the hardliners swing and miss. They get nothing because they don't actually know how to negotiate. This is always true. Said the GOP lawmaker, if they can't pass a bill, you can't actually get something you want. That's a constant battle for them. But a senior GOP aide fired back at those targeting the hardliners. Moderates are like Democrats. They always want to blame conservatives, but this time it's defense hawks who decided to grow a spine 30 days before the election, the aide said. No one understood what he meant. And Cole, who said he understood where the defense hawks were coming from, also expressed disagreement with the opposition from that corner. I do not disagree with Mike Rogers, one of my closest friends in Congress. I do not want a 6-month CR. Everyone knows that's continuing resolution, right? But I still think it's better to pass something and take the threat of a government shutdown off the table than to do nothing, Cole said. I've never had a bill that I thought, boy, that's a perfect bill. Not a consequential bill. But it's all a game of give and take, and we need to do that. Right now, the Speaker is bargaining for all of us. COP lawmakers supportive of the funding gambit were hopeful that passing the conservative proposal would strengthen the conference's leverage in forthcoming negotiations with Senate Democrats. That effort has turned some of the typical GOP politics upside down, changing some usually antagonistic hardliners into key proponents of the effort. I guess, by way of example, Representative Chip Roy of Texas, the lead sponsor of the Voter Proof of Citizenship bill, which he calls the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, or SAVE, Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, and an advocate for pairing it with, he's the lead sponsor and lead advocate for pairing it with the 6-month funding extension. And he has found himself at odds with the leadership in the past and lamented the opposition from some of his self-described conservative friends. So he's usually been the stick in the mud that has screwed things up, and people were angry with him. This time he wanted this thing to pass, and some other people were the stick in the mud, and he's very angry with them because they don't understand empathy. They're not actually giving the Speaker the ability to go do what we're asking generally, to go do. That's okay. I find it ironic, but it is what it is, Roy said. Okay. That was a very intellectual statement. It is what it is. We got to do what we got to do. All right. Thank you. I don't think we ought to be funding government without forcing some changes in reforms. Right? Some changes in reforms. Not and reforms. Changes in reforms. That was the point here, Roy later added. Can we get this in the next year? Avoid a lame duck omnibus? Can we force a question on something as important as voting integrity and American citizen voting? Some of my colleagues want to run around squawking about 12 appropriations bills when we only have 5 passed, in part because of debates back and forth within the conference. Wow, did I learn nothing from that? Other conservatives, however, have staked opposition to Johnson's funding plans because of the lack of spending cuts and the use of a continuing resolution, raising concerns about the ballooning deficit. We're drawing ourselves into a complete economic collapse that we can't come back from, Representative Corey Mills of Florida told reporters while explaining his opposition. And that's been the threat for 50 years, and it just doesn't happen. It's weird. It's almost as if the economy doesn't work that way. A second House Republican expressed frustration with mixed messages from the right flank. What do they want? Regular order, or do they want to be in a position where we have a CR? The House Republican said. Okay. I mean, I understand the difference between regular order and doing things by a CR, but I mean, what's the answer supposed to be to that question? I don't know. 2 of the Republicans publicly opposed to Johnson's spending plan, Representatives Matt Rosendale of Montana and Andy Biggs of Arizona, are members of the Freedom Caucus. And in August, the caucus explicitly requested Johnson's plan, a continuing resolution that runs into early 2025, paired with the SAVE Act. Rosendale said his position should dissuade one of the rumors that if you're in the Freedom Caucus, that you have to vote just like the Freedom Caucus, adding that the group members have different things that they agree upon, plenty of things they don't. Some Republicans suggested that those on the right flank are acting as disingenuous negotiators. I don't want to be critical of anybody, but there are some who ask for things, and even if they get them, they still won't vote for it, which then is pretty clear that they're not dealing in good faith and that it's all about getting press and getting clicks, said Representative Mario Diaz-Balart of Florida, a senior appropriator. While the current dynamics are getting under the skin of House Republicans, it's not a new phenomenon for the conference. House Republicans have tried to pass regular spending bills with funding levels they knew the Democratic-controlled Senate would never accept, only to pull the measures or watch them fail on the floor due to opposition from within the House GOP. A year ago, former Speaker Kevin McCarthy attempted a remarkably similar strategy, attaching a GOP border bill to a continuing resolution that failed on the House floor, prompting him to pass a clean stopgap with the help of Democrats. And while frustration is bubbling up in some GOP corners over the opposition to Johnson's spending strategy, one House Republican said he is not fazed because the behavior has been the status quo in this Congress. This sort of dynamic has happened enough times in the 118th that I wouldn't say frustration is rising. I would say that unfortunately the membership has just kind of started to accept it as situation normal. Representative Dusty Johnson, that's the real name, of South Dakota, said, I still think we should be able to muster some frustration. We can be a better team. I think we need to be a better team. The stakes are high enough. We should get our act together and back the Speaker's play. All right, well, wit and wisdom from Dusty Johnson, which, that's his real name, but if that's an issue for you, well, then watch that, Johnson. Don't leave it Dusty sitting around getting, all right, well, at any rate, that's what's happening, or was happening at the end of last week, and now we have the slightly more updated article from yesterday, also in Hill, also this time by Michael Schnell, acting of his own accord. All eyes on Speaker Johnson for the next move on government funding. All eyes are, as you know from the headline, on Speaker Mike Johnson this week as lawmakers await his next move in the fight over government funding after Republican resistance foiled his initial strategy for avoiding an end-of-the-month shutdown. Johnson, amid opposition from multiple corners of the GOP conference, scrapped plans last week to vote on a partisan funding plan that paired a 6-month CR with a bill to require proof of citizenship to register to vote. Congress adjourned for the week without voting on legislation to avert a shutdown. Members in both parties and chambers are now waiting for Johnson to announce his next play in the funding process as the September 30th shutdown deadline inches closer. The Speaker has suggested that he may make another attempt at passing his partisan stopgap bill this week, which would face heavy headwinds in the House as critics, particularly Democrats and fiscal hawks, dig in on their opposition. Both chambers, meanwhile, will be focused on the fallout from Sunday's apparent assassination attempt against former President Trump. Yeah, there is that. I don't know why that would occupy anybody's time at all, much less in Congress. This is the second one in less than 3 months, which took place at his golf course in Florida. The Trump campaign said the former president is safe. Not really. He's a very dangerous guy, actually. Don't get near him. The House task force looking into the July assassination attempt against Trump has already said it requested a briefing from the Secret Service about Sunday's incident. No, you don't. Oh, no. They need to have a second task force. Do you know that they have this? Last night, happened to see on social media that, one, that there was such a task force, and two, that Joshua Friedman was circulating their logo of sorts. They've set some graphic designers to work to making them a header for their webpage, the Task Force on the Attempted Assassination of Donald J. Trump. And they throw the J in there. Very official. And I accidentally joined that task force yesterday thinking it was a planning committee, but it is not. It is, in fact, an investigative committee, but they didn't bother forming a committee. So they assembled their own informal task force on it. Again, you could punctuate that differently and read it as a different assignment. Task, force on the attempted assassination of Donald J. Trump. I don't believe they really need to force it at this point, considering that they've had a second one. I think just organically these assassination attempts are arising of their own accord. But I was curious about whether or not they were going to try another task force. I don't think there's 7 weeks left, right? They have not thought this through. They're going to have 3-4 of these task forces, unless, of course, the first task force doubles up in its workload and decides all attempted assassinations of Donald J. Trump will be investigated by this task force. To what end, we don't know, but send us all your information. And I don't know, is there any work to do on this one? This time the Secret Service performed as designed, right? They saw a threat, they They confronted the threat and prevented the assassination from even being attempted. So what task has this force got for this one? Well, they requested some information. We all request information. Don't we all want a little bit of information? I don't see why that would distract from activity on the floor, but members will be busy trying to get themselves interviewed about their work on that task force. That's about it. So where were we? Right, in the Senate, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is staging a vote on a bill to protect in vitro fertilization, not IUF, but IVF, or whatever it is, or I don't know what the initials are anymore. But, apparently that's a super important distinction, and Tim Walsh is a liar and should resign because he used the wrong one in his description of his family's seeking out of treatment. But anyway, Chuck Schumer going to bring forth a bill to protect in vitro fertilization as Democrats continue to emphasize women's reproductive rights on the campaign trail. And the House Foreign Affairs Committee will move to hold Secretary of State Antony Blinken in contempt of Congress. One is about actually helping out families and making sure that their access to health care is protected. And the other House is going to impeach another, or move towards impeachment of another cabinet member. This time, though, just starting with the contempt of Congress. This over allegations that Blinken had failed to respond to a subpoena requesting him to testify about the U.S.'s messy withdrawal from Afghanistan 3 years ago. Okay. Congress, meanwhile, awaits Johnson's funding play. Johnson is expected to move on government funding this week because, that's his responsibility. The path he takes, however, remains unknown. The Speaker last week attempted to pass his partisan spending plan that included that SAVE Act. You know what it would do by now. He called off the vote hours before because it was poised to fail amid multi-pronged GOP opposition. He actually counted the votes this time. Hardline conservatives said they would not support a stopgap. Defense hawks expressed concerns about the impact at the Pentagon. Moderates were worried about having a shutdown threat so close to the election. Same story as last week. Johnson told reporters last Wednesday, that his leadership team would take the weekend to build consensus on the legislation and suggested it could come up for a vote this week. The whip is going to do the hard work and build consensus. I wonder how he's doing. We're going to work through the weekend on that. Asked Thursday how that effort was progressing, the Speaker said, "We have a lot of people making thoughtful decisions. It's fruitful." Johnson has not signaled how he plans to approach the funding fight when lawmakers return to Washington this week, though he has several options, none of which would be unanimously accepted within the House GOP conference, but they don't have much room for dissent, so that's the story. The Speaker could make another attempt to bring his CR plus SAVE Act up for a vote, though it would still face heavy headwinds, again, from hardline conservatives, defense hawks, and moderates. And if it's just one of each, you're in trouble. Johnson could keep the SAVE Act in the package and have the length, cut in half, not just have, the length of the continuing resolution from 6 months to 3 months. Apparently that move would ease concerns among defense hawks, but likely more draw opposition from hardline conservatives. Even if the legislation were to squeak through the House, however, it would still be a non-starter in the Senate, where Democrats have said non-citizen voting is already illegal and rare, and have argued that the legislation could burden eligible voters, much the same way that the Real ID Act has done. I don't know that it's preventing anybody from voting who shouldn't already be voting. But in the meantime, millions of Americans have to jump through extra hoops to get a more expensive license that they have to wait longer for, so that something, which is already illegal, won't happen. All right. Finally, the Speaker could move forward with a clean continuing resolution, likely a 3-month stopgap, a move that would be poised to pick up support among Democrats, but incense hardline Republicans, who cares, and Trump, who has urged Republicans to oppose any government funding unless it addresses election integrity. Several Republicans have said they see the funding fight inevitably ending with a clean continuing resolution. The Speaker could not could also attempt to move a clean 6-month continuing resolution, though that would still face opposition among defense hawks and hardline conservatives and Trump, who's not a member of the House, who are pushing for the inclusion of the SAVE Act. Johnson has not indicated which direction he's leaning, but the menu of options, none of which would please all House Republicans, are putting him in a bind as he works to avert a shutdown and protect his standing in the GOP conference, particularly among hardline conservatives, as he looks to retain his leadership position in the next Congress. And then more about the assassination attempt task force. Congress reacts to apparent Trump assassination attempt. Why? I don't know. But I have seen their line among top Republicans, which is, I think, was also demonstrated by J.D. Vance yesterday, insisting that the second assassination attempt was actually proof that liberals were the ones who needed to tone down their rhetoric, because apparently he believed their rhetoric was driving what I guess he thought was liberal assassins to make these attempts. They are, of course, both Republicans who have made these attempts. And, I did see on social media somebody pointing out that perhaps we ought to stop calling them assassination attempts and start calling them friendly fire incidents, which is about what's happening. And, of course, as Greg was reminding us yesterday, this may be a case of leopards eating a face, the fact being that it was Donald Trump who repealed the Obama-era imposition of the mandatory background checks for those with mental health histories who are interested in purchasing a gun. And then, of course, 2 people with mental health histories ended up with those weapons in their hands and were able to at least get in a position to take a shot at Trump. No one knows how these things would happen, but I guess they're going to figure it all out on the task force. In the meantime, blaming Democrats, no doubt. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And, of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options, too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon, too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I suppose we can dive in to see what might be going on. I would like a little bit of insight as to what they think they're doing at this task force. Sunday's apparent assassination attempt against Trump, the second in recent weeks, is expected to be a focus for lawmakers on Capitol Hill this week as they look into the incident against the former president. Representative Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania is the chair of the Trump assassination attempt task force. Which really, again, sounds aspirational rather than investigative. And Representative Jason Crow, Democrat of Colorado, the ranking member of the group, said they have already requested a briefing from the Secret Service about the occurrence, writing in a statement that they are deeply concerned about political violence. So there you have it. That's their progress report. They have already requested a briefing in the mere, 6 weeks or so since the assassination attempt. I don't know. I'm not certain how long it's been, but, they finally got around to requesting some information. The task force is monitoring this attempted assassination, the second one, of former President Trump in West Palm Beach this afternoon, we've requested a briefing. Oh, I see. They've already requested a briefing for the second one. With the U.S. Secret Service about what happened and how security responded. The pair wrote, "We are thankful that the former president was not harmed, but remain deeply concerned about about political violence and condemn it in all its forms, except the ones happening in Springfield, Ohio, which are awesome. The task force will share updates as we learn more." By the way, I think Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio announced earlier today, possibly, or perhaps late last night, that there have been some 33 bomb threats in Springfield, tiny Springfield, Ohio, since this all began. Government buildings, hospitals, schools, everything, anywhere where they think they can disrupt things. And apparently the local universities as well have gone to, as I said yesterday, virtual classes. And I think it's like 4 school days in a row that the local school system has been disrupted and shut down due to bomb threats as well. You'll remember, of course, that the conservative heartland folk of Springfield, Ohio, were extraordinarily concerned at the closure of schools during COVID, which would be a bad and communist way of shutting down schools, as opposed to this peaceful and patriotic way of shutting down schools through bomb threats. That's how they want their kids to stay home from school, not to avoid deadly disease, but to stay home and resent their neighbors. Okay. Well, let's see. So, all right, the task force has requested a briefing on a thing, and that's great news, even though pretty much the briefing will tell you what you could have been reading in the newspaper at this point. News of the apparent assassination attempt first became public just before 2:30 p.m. on Sunday, when Trump's campaign communication director released a statement saying that he was safe following gunshots in his vicinity. No further details, but I guess now there are further details. Authorities later held a press conference and disclosed that a Secret Service agent opened fire on a man with a gun near the Trump International Golf Course in West Palm Beach, Florida, where Trump was golfing at the time. Why? No one knows. I mean, why he was golfing at the time, considering that he's embroiled in a very close election. But he must figure the fix is in or something. A man is in custody in connection with the incident. Top lawmakers reacted to the news Sunday. Johnson met with Trump at his Mar-a-Lago residence after the incident. Why? And has been briefed on the matter. Johnson posted a photo with Trump on Twitter, writing that he and his wife are thanking God for protecting him today, once again. And in a statement on Sunday, Schumer wrote, "There is no place in this country for political violence of any kind. The perpetrator must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." I guess he was as uninterested as the rest of us. And then Senate to vote on protecting access to IVF. That, of course, explained in the previous article. The House panel now moving to hold Blinken in contempt, as explained last week. And I believe that brings us to the end then. I think we've mined the hill for as much as we possibly could on those subjects. And time now to take a look at a couple other ones. First of all, I guess we can add the New York Times is reporting on Trump rolling out his new cryptocurrency business. You may recall that when he ran for president the first time in 2016, one of the norms that he eventually flouted, but that he pretended that he was interested in observing was separating himself from his private businesses. And should I be elected to the presidency, I will, of course, separate myself from my businesses. Now he is launching new businesses 7 weeks from the election. So he's, I think, given up on the idea of even pretending to separate himself from his businesses. What would he be doing rolling out a new business now? And what would he be doing rolling out a business about which he knows nothing? As you'll quickly see as we read through this article, in a live stream, Donald Trump formally introduced World Liberty Financial, a crypto venture led by 2 digital currency entrepreneurs with little experience running high-profile businesses. That should surprise no one, of course. And World Liberty Financial is already mired in scandal. We haven't really read much about it because I wasn't entirely sure it was a real thing and was going to launch, but it's already the subject of a couple of articles that I've seen in passing that are this whole thing is a regulatory mess, as most cryptocurrency ventures are, and bound for trouble and wrapped up not only in the hands of his idiot fail sons, Eric and Don Jr., but of course the shadiest characters they could possibly find. There's really no call for an additional cryptocurrency effort at this point. Trump is clearly just in it for the money. But there's another interesting twist in it. If we run through this article, it is David Yaffe Bellany and teamed up with Sharon Lafreniere and Matthew Goldstein on the byline for this piece. A day after an apparent assassination attempt against former President Donald J. Trump. Right? That's very dramatic. It deserves dramatic music. Oh my God. The day after, what did he do? Immediately in the immediate aftermath of the second assassination attempt against former President Donald J. Trump, now running for president. Well, the obvious cure. He appeared on a live stream to champion his latest business venture, cryptocurrencies. He was very rattled by the second assassination attempt. And, of course, he has studied up, done his homework on the subject, got on the live stream, and let everybody know that he had a mastery of the subject that will totally bolster investor confidence. Ready? Crypto is one of those things we have to do. This is what he said on Twitter. Whether we like it or not, I have to do it. I have to do it. I have to create the whole market for cryptocurrency. I like that too. Crypto is one of those things we have to. What is crypto? It's one of those things we have to do. Whether we like it or not, I have to do it. That is amazing. I would totally invest in that. Beside him were his collaborators, co-conspirators, I think is what you call them, including a family friend, Mr. Trump's two oldest sons. This isn't the family friend. They're part of the family. Trump's two oldest sons, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, and two little-known crypto entrepreneurs with no experience running a high-profile business. I think it said little in the headline, but okay. Together, they were rolling out Mr. Trump's crypto venture, World Liberty Financial, a project that has already, I told you, raised concerns about the former president's conflicts of interest and even alarmed some of his most vocal supporters in the industry. One, they don't like competitors, and two, they certainly don't like competitors that are run by people who can, let's say, fire everybody at the SEC unless they crack down on competitors but keep their hands off of World Liberty Financial. So that probably would concern everybody if they're really thinking about the way he's likely to run this thing. Trump has promoted the venture since August, but its exact purpose remains unclear. I have to do it. That's all we know. No official launch date has been set. 2 weeks, I would guess. On the live stream, he did not address the project directly, leaving the details to the two entrepreneurs. Okay. And the entrepreneurs' names are Chase Hero, two R's in that, although apparently he has sometimes spelled it with one, and I wonder if that stems from Trump saying that. He told me it could be one R or two. He said it didn't matter. Chase Hero and Zachary Folkman. Mr. Hero, I don't know whether he's really Hero or Hero, has described himself as, you ready for this? An upstanding businessman versed in the wild world of crypto. No, he has described himself as, quote, the dirtbag of the internet, unquote. Take all my money. Take all my money. I mean, he will, but this inspires no confidence. The dirtbag of the internet, well, Mr. Folkman used to teach classes on how to seduce women. These are the people. These are the ones you want. Zachary Folkman, which really, honestly, if you're doing that well, I guess one of the ways, I guess, he would imagine being able to seduce women would probably mean having unlimited funds for him, so this is probably all about that instead. But there you go. No official launch date. He said nothing about it because he doesn't know anything about it. He left the details to Chase Hero, the dirtbag of the internet, and a pickup artist guy. It's highly unusual for a presidential candidate to embark on a new business just weeks before Election Day. And even rarer for one to aggressively promote a venture designed to benefit himself and his family. But Throughout his political career, Mr. Trump has engaged in business dealings that ethics experts have flagged as problematic. He is the majority owner of Trump Media and Technology Group, the publicly traded parent company of his social media platform Truth Social, which accounts for some $2 billion of his personal wealth for no reason. Danielle Bryan, executive director of the Project on Government Oversight, a nonpartisan watchdog group, said that if Mr. Trump was elected in November, his involvement in the crypto venture would create serious conflicts of interest. The Securities and Exchange Commission has cracked down on the industry, arguing that nearly all cryptocurrencies are unregistered securities and ought to be treated like stocks traded on Wall Street. Mr. Trump would be able to push regulatory agencies to favor businesses he was involved in, Ms. Bryan said. In fact, he promises that will be the case. Ethics experts have said that his ownership of the social media company raises similar issues. Now, representatives for the Trump Organization and World Liberty Financial did not respond to requests for comment. For years, Mr. Trump was a crypto skeptic who denounced Bitcoin as a scam. But on the campaign trail, he has morphed into a vocal supporter, speaking at popular industry conferences, a conference anyway, and drawing donations from crypto executives. That's how he became a supporter. Oh, there's billionaires or people who have access to billions of dollars, whether they're stealing it from other people or not, who will give it to me. If I say I like it, then I like it. In fact, let's get in on it. Planning for World Liberty Financial began 9 months ago. They've steeped in the culture of cryptocurrency. 9 months ago, according to the Trump family friend involved in the venture, Steve Witkoff, a real estate magnate who helped spearhead it. On the live stream, Mr. Witkoff said he introduced Mr. Trump's sons to Mr. Harrow and Mr. Folkman, who have overseen the venture. Why did they need an introduction? Why didn't Mr. Folkman just seduce the two Trump bros? I don't really know. Anyway, by July, AMG Software Solutions, a company based in Puerto Rico, had filed a trademark on the new platform. The next month, Mr. Trump, Eric Trump, and Donald Trump Jr. started posting about it on Twitter. On the live stream on Monday, Mr. Trump and his sons said that crypto would transform the financial system without detailing what their business venture is designed to accomplish. It's designed to accomplish them getting your money. But privately, some people involved in World Liberty Financial have pitched it as a borrowing and lending platform, according to 3 people with knowledge of the project. A white paper for the venture, reviewed by the New York Times, said that it would feature a new cryptocurrency called WLFI, a $ WLFI, that would be sold to the public. On its official Twitter and Telegram accounts, World Liberty Financial said that the project aims to drive, quote, mass adoption of stable coins, unquote, a type of cryptocurrency designed to maintain a constant value of $1. One person briefed on the project described it as similar to an existing service called InstaDApp, an application that allows users to manage their investments across a range of crypto platforms. Is that a wallet, basically? Okay. And I don't know if I know what the point of a cryptocurrency designed to maintain a constant value of $1 is, but okay. And of course, I mean, doesn't this sort of fly in the face of the whole point of cryptocurrency originally, was that there would be no government involvement in or regulation of their currency, or its value would be sort of independent. But if you're pegging it to the dollar, then you're just completely dependent on the government propping up the dollar, I guess. All right, well, whatever. They don't care. It's just a way to take people's money. It's not about crypto anything. Several members of the Trump family have roles in the business, according to a list of team members included in the white paper. And get this, Mr. Trump's title is Chief Crypto Advocate, and Baron Trump, now getting into the act. He's 18 years old and getting publicly into the business, and now I guess fair game finally for criticism, even if he's a bit young. He's listed as the project's DeFi visionary. a reference to the branch of crypto known as decentralized finance. He's a visionary. No, I can see why. He's 18. So he's had lots of time to develop that vision. All right. Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr. are each described as Web3 ambassador. So none of them are doing anything. A disclaimer at the end of the document said the platform wasn't owned or managed by Mr. Trump, the Trump Organization, or his family, though family members might receive compensation. The white paper was earlier reported by the crypto news outlet CoinDesk. Behind the scenes, Steve Witkoff has taken a hands-on role. According to a person familiar with the planning, he envisioned the project partly as a way to give Barron Trump some experience with entrepreneurship, the person said, and steer him away from meme coins, a scam-ridden segment of the crypto industry. A spokesman for Mr. Witkoff declined to comment. Barron Trump did not participate in the live stream, but the former president described him as a crypto enthusiast. He's got 4 wallets or something, Mr. Trump said. He knows this stuff inside out. Again, inspiring huge amounts of confidence in the crypto world. The key figures in the project are Mr. Hero or whatever, and Mr. Folkman. On the live stream, Mr. Hero, who sometimes spells his surname Hero, said his aim was to give the everyday American access to crypto investments. This country's been so good to me. Where did he come from? And crypto has been so good to me, Mr. Hero said, and baseball has been very, very good to me. There's a photo of him here, looking ridiculous. Remember, he's the one who's the internet dirtbag, but he doesn't look, I don't know. I can't describe accurately. I mean, he's doofy looking, and he's wearing some kind of weird patterned blazer, but over like a V-neck t-shirt with some gold chains, so I don't know what's going on here. Mr. Hero is a relatively obscure figure in the crypto world. As a young man, he has said he was a habitual drug offender and was imprisoned, but later turned his life around and became rich. In 2022, he appeared at a crypto seminar hosted by Jordan Belfort, who inspired the 2013 movie The Wolf of Wall Street. That's not good, actually. At the event, Mr. Hero described stablecoins as the biggest innovation since sliced bread, and said his favorite of the coins was vivacious and insane and almost borderline a Ponzi scheme. That's a quote. I don't know why vivacious is in there, but there you have it. That's who the guy running for president is going into business with his whole family and this habitual drug offender ex-con. And I think really the SEC would probably be like, well, gosh, I don't know. 2 of the people at the minimum who are big names in this company are convicted felons. I don't know if I love this. Over the years, Mr. Hero has worked closely with Mr. Folkman, who founded a company called... Remember where Folkman comes from, right? Pickup guy. His company was called Date Hotter Girls, which offered seminars on, quote, attracting, dating, and keeping women of beauty and quality. This is a very, very philosophical man. Mr. Folkman and Mr. Hero have pursued a range of business ventures together, first in the U.S. Virgin Islands and later in Puerto Rico. Both have homes in Puerto Rico, which has become a haven for crypto enthusiasts who are drawn by a generous tax break, according to public records. Mr. Folkman is listed in a government database as one of the thousands of people living in Puerto Rico who received this tax break. Before they set up shop in Puerto Rico, Mr. Folkman and Mr. Hero ran the Nexus Group, an internet advertising and media company in the U.S. Virgin Islands that received a similar business tax break. Mr. Hero also ran a separate crypto trading business there called Pacer Capital. In the U.S. Virgin Islands, Mr. Hero and Mr. Folkman work with Alex Golubitsky, a lawyer listed in the white paper as World Liberty Financial's legal counsel. You need to know all the players here when they get arrested. In an email, Mr. Golubitsky said he could not discuss the crypto venture, but he referred to Mr. Hero and Mr. Folkman as talented tech entrepreneurs and drug offenders and pickup artists. On the live stream, Mr. Folkman said that the lawyers were in the room with him, staring daggers at me. Because of the government crackdown on crypto, he explained the digital currency associated with World Liberty Financial would be available in the United States only to accredited investors. The lawyers are getting nervous back there, he said. They're sweating. Well, good. But they'll all make good money when they are working as criminal defense attorneys after they arrest these guys, but not anybody in the Trump family. For some reason. Okay, so new scandal in the making. Now you're up to date on what he's going to make trouble for himself with and the next fraud for which he would likely be convicted. All right. In other news, along the line, I guess the latest development in the Russian payola scandal that we heard about a week and a half ago. New development here. Meta, the parent company that owns Facebook, it's Facebook. Meta bans RT and other Russian state media networks. So this, according to Katie Paul, reporting for Reuters here. It's just a quick hit article letting us know that this has happened. There's not much in the way of detail. Facebook owner Meta said on Monday that it was banning RT and another state media outlet, Rossiya Segodnya, I guess, if I'm getting that anywhere near correct, and other Russian state media networks, all banned from its platforms, claiming that the outlets had used deceptive tactics to carry out covert influence operations online. The ban, strongly criticized by the Kremlin, marks a sharp escalation in measures by the world's biggest social media company against Russian state media after years of more limited steps, such as blocking the outlets from running ads and reducing the reach of their posts. After careful consideration, we expanded our ongoing enforcement against Russian state media outlets, Rossiya Segodnya, RT, and other related entities are now banned from our apps globally for foreign interference activity, the social media company said in a written statement. Enforcement of the ban would roll out over the coming days, it said. In addition to Facebook, Meta's apps include Instagram, WhatsApp, and Threads. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters on Tuesday that Meta is discrediting itself with these actions. Yes, such selective actions against Russian media are unacceptable. So he's Transylvanian, actually, this guy. This complicates prospects for normalizing our relations with Meta. Is that something you need to normalize relations with? That's kind of scary. Moscow branded Meta an extremist organization in 2022. How do you like that? And blocked Instagram and Facebook, objecting to changes in Meta's hate speech policy designed to allow users to vent their anger over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So that made them into an extremist organization there. That's interesting. Russia has also criticized previous efforts by Meta to limit the reach of Russian media and fined the company several times for not removing content in Russia that it considers illegal. The pre-existing bans on Instagram and Facebook may limit Russia's ability to respond to Meta's state media block, but WhatsApp, which Russia has stopped short of banning so far, is used by millions. Telegram Messenger, whose Russian founder, Pavel Durov, was placed under formal investigation in France last month, is widely used in Russia. We have to catch up on that story, too. VK Video, run by state-controlled tech firm VK, offers an alternative to YouTube, which has come under pressure in Russia over its efforts to block Russian state media. The White House declined to comment on Meta's move, which came after the United States filed money laundering charges against 2 RT employees for what officials said was a scheme to hire an American company to produce online content to influence the 2024 election. You heard about them originally, Tenet Media, and then we heard yesterday that as soon as those charges came down, the company folded, closed its offices, and everybody disappeared. Totally, normal business. Anyway, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Friday that countries should treat the activities of Russian state broadcaster RT as they do covert intelligence operations. RT has mocked the U.S. actions and accused the United States of trying to prevent the broadcaster from operating as a journalistic organization. In briefing materials shared with Reuters, Meta said it had seen Russian state-controlled media try to evade detection on their online activities in the past, and expected them to continue to try to engaging in deceptive practices going forward. So, all right. Well, that wasn't terribly informative beyond the fact that the ban has been imposed and something to watch. And then, of course, finding out that Meta is an organization on the level of which it seems normal in the Kremlin to say that they need to find a way to normalize relations with them. Normally that's something you do with another nation state, not a large internet communications company. But all right, we probably could scroll down a little bit and try and find the latest on the Telegram founder being arrested in France. It was an interesting story, and there's some interesting background that we should probably add to it. Maybe we can use the 1 minute break at the top of the hour to find those things. In the meantime, let's see, a couple other things we wanted to add here. Let me double back on a couple of stories. I only have a minute or so to do it, so I can do this one. Yesterday, I forget what we were talking about that we got to. Oh, yeah, right. It was one of the listener suggestions about maybe that Taylor Swift could use a fleet of electric semi-trailers to move her equipment around during her tour and, so thereby promote, I guess, pro-environmental, climate change-oriented social changes. But I wasn't sure what the availability of such semi-trailers really was. Do you have them? They exist, as it turns out. And Scott has sent me an article that suggests not only do they exist, but they are problematic. And in what sense? Well, for one thing, the people, I guess, taking the lead in developing them, it's Tesla, which you might have guessed already. But two, that they pose unique safety issues, including this one here reported for CNBC back on Friday by Laura Kolodny, reporting that a Tesla Semi caught on fire in California, and it took 50,000 gallons of water to extinguish this fire. Wow. Well, that's bad news. We can give you the key points, I think, some of them, before we exit for the break. The National Transportation Safety Board is investigating the cause of this crash and fire that closed an artery of California's Interstate 80 last month for 15 hours. So the crash was some time ago, but this report came out on Friday. And then again, the report that it took Cal Fire 50,000 gallons of water to extinguish the flames. That ain't good. Might not be his fault, though. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. A little bit late getting out, a little bit late coming back. Just skimming this article about the Tesla semi-collision here. It was a total collision. It's a semi-trailer, what do we call them? Semi-electric truck, anyway. Semi what, though? And I've never really understood why we refer to it as semi anything, but semi something. Anyway, this thing has crashed. Apparently, Tesla first unveiled the fully electric semi-trucks at an event in November of 2017, but the company is still in pilot production. Story is here. Single vehicle collision, didn't run into anything else. Don't know what it hit, though. Involving a Tesla semi-electric truck, took 50,000 gallons of water to extinguish and required aircraft to dump fire retardant overhead, like a forest fire, I guess. According to a preliminary report on Friday from the NTSB, the crash, which occurred on California's Interstate 80 west of Lake Tahoe, is being investigated by the NTSB. Cal Fire's efforts to put out the flames cooled the vehicle's massive battery to keep it from reigniting and prevented the fire from spreading beyond the crash site, the NTSB said. The Tesla truck, driven by an employee, was headed to the company's battery factory in Sparks, Nevada, from a warehouse in Livermore, California, the report said. The incident closed down part of the I-80 for 15 hours. Tesla CEO Elon Musk first showed off the semi-truck design at an event in November of 2017, promising it would come to the market in 2020. What year is it now? Yeah. The company still has not started producing the trucks in high volume, but it is building out production lines at its Nevada facility. Preparation of a semi-factory continues and is on track to begin production by the end of 2025, Tesla now says. The NTSB report confirmed that Tesla's driver assistance systems, which are marketed as autopilot and full self-driving, parentheses, supervised, unparentheses, that's what it says, in the U.S. were not, quote, operational at the time of the semi-collision and fire. Tesla did not respond to CNBC's request for comment. So I guess what we don't know is whether the driver was actually driving, right? This is sort of weasel words here. Well, they weren't operational, but I think we read at some point that Tesla's designed their software such that they connected their and they wouldn't necessarily be connected systems, right? Like crash detection, or impact object detection capability and autopilot. Like you want the autopilot to have access to that information. But apparently one of the downsides of it is that once the computer says, yeah, I detect that we're about to crash here, it then switches off autopilot so that you can then appear in court and say, no, this crash wasn't, autopilot wasn't even operational at the time of the crash. It was operational up to a millisecond before the crash and for the previous 2 hours. But at the time of the crash, as defined by this frame of milliseconds, it was not operational, nor was it operational afterwards, by the way. So we can't really tell whether or not they were really using the autopilot at the time. It might help if we learned, like if it crashed into a bridge, you might say, yeah, that sounds like something where the driver wasn't really in control or paying attention. But no further details are available. So, okay, I wasn't really expecting to go down that direction, but it was sitting there, and we mentioned the electric semi-trailers yesterday, so I thought I'd double back on it. Which brings me back to mail items that I have been waiting on. I have my note here to return each day to Jeremy Freiberger's continuing series on down ballot funding. And by the way, the sooner the better, of course, with all of that money. Don't wait until the very end to send your money. The later the money arrives, the less flexible and useful it is. So I remind you that that money should be leaving your hands now, and should already have left your hands. But if you haven't done it yet, please go ahead and do so, and take a look at all of these various methodologies for injecting cash directly down ballot. There's a new thing for you to take a peek at today, a new angle on all this from Jeremy's continuing series, a plug for the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, the DLCC. The final installment, if you will, on this state legislature tour. And he begins this way, that the show's recent plugs from me for the DLCC's ongoing state legislature efforts provides a nice segue into this wrap-up synopsis. While doing research for the just concluded 6-state discussion of closely divided state legislatures, and one it isn't, I happened to take notice of the DLCC's spotlight races, which is something also mentioned by me, David, on last Wednesday's show, although I bet we're like 2 weeks past now on this one. As such, I, Jeremy Freiberger, did hereby take a moment to see how these highlighted candidates were distributed across the nation. What I, Jeremy, discovered was partly predictable and partly intriguing. The predictable aspect is that Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Arizona, 3 states which were reviewed in our 6-state discussion, each have a large number of spotlight races. In fact, of the 22 states which are currently listed as having DLCC highlighted state legislature candidates, Pennsylvania has the most, 19. Michigan comes in third at 13, and Arizona is fourth on the list with 12. What I found intriguing is that the number 2 state on the DLCC's list is what you would hope it would be, North Carolina, with 14 candidates. Now, number 5 on the list, that brings us to 1, Pennsylvania, 2, North Carolina, 3, Michigan, 4th, Arizona. Number 5 is Kansas with 10 on the list. 6th is a 3-way tie, 7 races apiece between Nevada, Georgia, and Iowa. So the DLCC in its targeting has it this way, right? Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Michigan, Arizona, Kansas. You might not have guessed that. And then a 3-way tie between Nevada, Georgia, and Iowa. North Carolina, of course, was discussed by me, David, that is, on last Wednesday's show. Again, probably 2 weeks ago now. Is this, or maybe even more. Yeah, probably 2 weeks. This is a September 6th email that I'm reading from. But okay. It appears that the DLCC, by highlighting 14 of North Carolina's state legislative races, also feels that Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson's long-running troubles might offer an incredible opportunity for North Carolina down-ballot Dems. He may really ruin the North Carolina Republican Party for some time to come. We should see if a couple extra bucks from each of us lets us all strike while the iron is hot. Additionally, perhaps the dastardly deeds of North Carolina Republicans during recent years have the DLCC sensing a comeuppance in the works. North Carolina, Nevada, and Georgia, of course, are also well-known swing states. Thus, maybe the DLCC is also hoping that a strong turnout for Harris Walz will propel down-ballot Dems. Going further into the DLCC's list of such contests, though, I have no explanation for why Kansas and Iowa have so many spotlighted races. Nor can I discern why another 27 such candidates are scattered widely across 14 additional states. As such, I'm trusting that the DLCC knows much more than I do about what is to be gained and lost depending on these additional spotlighted races. In summary, because I've believed for more than 18 months, except during those dark 24 days following the June 27th debate, that this political environment is absolutely terrific for Democrats, I feel that 2024 is an incredible opportunity for Dems to make substantial, perhaps once-in-a-generation gains. Therefore, in addition to supporting the state legislative campaign committees for Arizona, Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and Wisconsin, I suggest also trusting the DLCC with a bit of general support, and you should do so at dlcc.org. And then thanks again to me and the listeners of KITM. And in the meantime, let's extend ourselves until November 5th, and after that, we celebrate. Okay, so I think that, shall we stop at this point? Although I'm falling behind in his running commentary here, but maybe I'm staying stable here, because I think that about a week passes before we hear more from Jeremy, but I'm still falling behind. And there's still much more to get to here, but let's mark it all unread from here and do it a little at a time. By the way, there's another thing in here waiting for mention today. And this is a fine way of making your point if you're not up to recording an entire segment, and we happily invite you, as always, to do that. There's always the brief note via one of the various inputs, email in this case, from Paul McDonald on the terrible rumors being spread intentionally and endangering people in Springfield, Ohio. But I guess what occurred to him was, and I guess it's the discussion of cats in general, but while listening to this ridiculous assertions of Haitians eating cats, it dawned on me that the felines we're discussing are to the relation between the Haitian non-cats, which aren't happening, and Schrodinger's cats. That is to say, the whole thing stuck in the matrix of quantum mechanics. If this assertion is still an issue with the oh-so-serious media, maybe we want to add this conjecture to our discussion of this truly horrendous accusation. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to at this point, with the defenders, including J.D. Vance, now still defending their rumor-mongering and endangering the Haitian population here in Springfield and all over the country, wherever they happen to have settled. There's still zero proof of this stuff. Oh, and my gosh, have you seen the Rich Lowry video? I'm going to have to find that one and offer it to you in the links, but I won't be playing that one. But Rich Lowry, he of the seeing, what did he say? He saw sparkles or something, or starbursts. That was it. When he first saw, this is his political sensibilities, when he first saw Sarah Palin introduced to the political world, and the first time she spoke, he saw starbursts. She was such an emerging star. He couldn't wait to elevate her to the top levels of Republican leadership, and it was a new era, and America was going to have a revolution behind the brilliance of Sarah Palin. He's still working, and he's in fact editor of the National Review, and he was on the fake TV show with Megyn Kelly. You know, their TV show is produced the same way our little radio show here is produced on the internet. It's, you know, you do it in your basement. But anyway, she was interviewing him, and, well, the video evidence of what happens, of what transpires, is that Rich Lowry, in describing what's going on or what people are accusing Haitian immigrants of doing in Springfield, of course, his description is that people have been complaining to the police of, well, he just says it and then just walks right past it. He says that there have been complaints of Haitian N-words stealing pets and geese and ducks. I mean, he just blurts that out and then goes like, and then goes on, and nobody blinks. Now, if you were feeling generous, and I mean, it's really generous, because it's not half the word that he says. He doesn't start saying the word and then think better of it. He blurts it out. And then there's a little bit of a verbal hitch, and then he continues on, I think, thinking, oh my gosh, I think he realizes what he just did, and then is like, I better just keep going and forget about it. But there is this tiniest possibility that what he's doing here is here's what he's doing. He's explaining, he's laughing at the concept of Dana Bash having pushed back on J.D. Vance and thinking that she had bested him in the exchange. He thinks that's laughable because he says, you know, he tells what he's been hearing from his constituents. She says, but there's no proof of this. And he said, and that the police have gone back through the 911 calls, because he offers up as proof. No, the constituents have been calling the police and complaining of this activity. And she says, actually, the police have gone through 11 months of 911 calls, and they haven't found any such complaints. But what actually she says is that there are, over 11 months, there are 2 instances in which, and it's important that, as my recollection of what she says is, there are 2 instances in which local people have called the police, though it's not always clear that they've called 911 about it, but they've called the police to say that there are such allegations. Neither of them, as I understand it, called the police to say, I saw someone and I can tell you who it was, or describe them for you, steal a cat or a pet or a duck or a goose or something. And I don't remember what she says they were describing. But again, these were second-hand descriptions, not an eyewitness calling in having witnessed a crime. So they don't really count for much of anything, if anything at all. But J.D. Vance insisted that that was proof that there was proof. There isn't proof. There's evidence and there's difference, as you know. But he insisted that that should be considered as evidence. It's extraordinarily weak evidence, but I guess you could call it evidence. Meanwhile, Rich Lowry took it the other way and said, she said that there were no calls, but there were, in fact, 2 calls. So how could you possibly say that there were no calls? But in so describing it, I think this might actually be true. I mean, I don't doubt where Rich Lowry's head is. He's an idiot. He loved Sarah Palin. He's that kind of a reactionary crank. So he is very likely the kind of person who would very much enjoy expressing his racism openly. But I think he also knows that, as dumb as the National Review is, he still has a certain responsibility not to just simply blurt out the N-word. But I think he might have been saying, what he's trying to say, I think, is, so they said there were no calls, but in fact there were 2 calls in which people reported seeing their Haitian neighbors stealing pets, ducks. I don't remember what he was trying to say that the callers said they saw. But Haitian neighbors, and he also, of course, wants to make sure that you know that they are immigrants and that their new linguistic trick is to refer to them as migrants, by the way. And that's a good question I saw asked on social media earlier today. When do we start calling them migrants? They're not migrants going back and forth between Haiti and the United States for seasonal work. They're permanent residents of the United States and in most cases seek citizenship. They are immigrants, and I mean, they migrated, but they're not migrants. I think, first of all, that is supposed to evoke vagrants. And it's also supposed to evoke this idea of their temporary residence in the United States as opposed to permanent residents seeking citizenship. So I don't know. But at any rate, he can't decide whether to say that he has heard of callers saying that Haitian neighbors are taking pets or that Haitian migrants are taking pets. And if you mash up neighbors and migrants, you can have disastrous results along the lines of what he actually said. But I got to tell you, when I played it and I offered that possibility here at KITM World Headquarters, I did not get a lot of receptive listeners. It was like, I don't know, man. He really just says it. He just says it. So, all right. I'll share a link with you of that. I mean, I don't know. I could easily play it, but I don't know if I want to give airplay to that. And I don't know how you handle that either. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting, and I thank Paul McDonald for sending me the comment about the what came to mind when people were so hung up on the cats idea. It's probably occurred to a number of you about how we might deal with this nonsense continuing. I mean, it really is kind of disturbing, to say the very least. But Vance shows no sign of letting up on it. There's just no convincing him that he's wrong on this front. All right, let's see. Well, I wasn't able during the 1-minute break to find very easily the information about the Telegram founder being arrested when landing in France. But there's also a couple of stories, if I'm just kind of keep on scrolling a little bit, but I wanted to sort of update you on where that is on this. And then there was some reporting that suggested that maybe the story wasn't exactly what it was cracked up to be. I'm not real sure, but there is some ProPublica reporting on it that's sort of gives backing to the need for some very close scrutiny on Telegram under the headline of the Accelerationists app, how Telegram became the center of gravity for a new breed of domestic terrorists. That does sound like something that you might want to keep an eye on and that somebody could probably get themselves arrested for if they really concentrated on what they were doing. Some slow loading of the items in Pocket here. So my search can't continue just yet. But I think I'm kind of in the neighborhood of when these articles came out. But there was some real interesting. I'll see if I can't kind of. I'm very interested in adding it to the conversation because it's a developing story. But, I may have to do this work offline, I guess, in order to... And the ProPublica story won't change our perception, I don't think. It'll give us some details about why Telegram is so dangerous. But yeah, I kind of wanted to be able to share. There was some other information about maybe this story was being trumped up a little bit. Not, no pun intended there. But yeah, I don't know. I'm going to have to do some searching in order to find this out. But we'll see if we can't add it to the background. In the meantime, maybe what I can do is we'll promise you more of that. But get back to the story that we began reading the other day about Iran turning to international criminal organizations in order to target its critics that have moved out beyond its jurisdiction. That, I think, of some importance, and also deserves an eye on that situation just as it develops. But we'll see if we can't remind you of what's going on here and then find where we left off yesterday. You'll just have to weave these 2 days worth of discussion of it together. But the basics of the story as we read through it yesterday was that now several countries have taken their cues from Russia in terms of acting out to try to exert some election interference in the United States. Russia has a broader array of targets for that, really all Western democracy. But a few other countries, it was raising concerns that perhaps China, perhaps Iran, and then, as it turns out, India, among those interested in taking cues from the Russians, not only in working in election interference, but less about election interference, apparently, so far anyway, in India's case. But what India and Iran and China had in common was an interest in expanding their reach in enforcing their totalitarian view of freedom of everything, freedom of speech, freedom of conducting one's own affairs, etc., even outside of their own jurisdiction. That once dissidents had fled Iran or left China or left India, seeking to find a place where their free speech might be protected, like in the United States, instead find that there are willing agents of the regimes who will travel to these far-flung locales, the United States, Canada, UK, wherever the people may run to, and find ways of suppressing them there, either in so far, the preferred expression of this for the Chinese is simply to let them know that they're identified as dissidents and that people will be following them around and making their lives miserable, even in the United States, all the way up to, as India has done, assassination attempts against outspoken Sikh activists living in the United States and Canada. And now a step beyond that, Iran contracting with international criminal organizations, including the Hell's Angels, the motorcycle gangs, etc., to carry out attacks on Iranian dissidents. But also enlisting Eastern European crime syndicates on things like this, and it's creating a problem for the authorities who know well enough to watch out when known Iranian assets arrive in the United States for some unknown reason. They follow them around. But if an Eastern European person, criminal or otherwise, arrives in the United States, I assume they're watching anybody on a criminal list like that, but they don't necessarily raise the alarm when Eastern European, an Albanian criminal finds himself in proximity to the Iranian consulate. Is that an issue for them? Not offhand, unless it's also near the Albanian consulate, in which case they might be worried, or who knows what comes of that. But anyway, I don't know. It all sounded rather ridiculous and fantastical, thinking about them hiring the Hells Angels and biker gangs. Though I was reminded that some years ago we read the story of one of the Trump developments in Florida, one of the licensing deals. So is it... I can't remember the name of the development, but it was a particular coastal town where there were something like 7 different Trump Tower developments in the area, and that they were largely owned by Russian and pro-Russian Ukrainian oligarchs, but up to and including somebody who was the head of a Moscow motorcycle gang. And it struck me as ridiculous then, but now I guess a little bit less so, that the Iranians would catch on and say, actually, motorcycle gang criminals are just the kinds of people who can be hired for probably a lot less money than your basic movie-type international hitman sort of person who might want millions of dollars for this work, whereas biker gangs would probably do it for considerably less. Anyway, the biker gang mentioned here in the Russian mob network known as the Thieves-in-Law, not the one I was thinking of. They had some sort of ridiculous name for the Russian biker gang involved in the ownership ring of the condos down in Florida. But I guess that's like a legit resource for these guys.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. So, by the way, the name of the Russian motorcycle gang that I was thinking of was the Night Wolves. You know, kind of that's the sort of thing that attracts, I don't know, biker types, I guess, that sort of name. But Night Wolves is the one I was thinking of. I knew it was Night something, but at any rate, to get back to the story about what's happening with Iran's use of criminal elements here, I think we left off yesterday in reading that the United States has faced a wave of similar threats, that is the use of criminals to carry out international intimidation on behalf of the Iranian regime. This includes several that have been detailed in criminal indictments connecting biker gangs in Canada and mob elements in Eastern Europe to planned assassinations commissioned by Iran. Right? Matthew G. Olson, who heads National Security Division at the Justice Department, said that Iran is clearly at the top of this list of states that year after year seek to kill or abduct dissidents and journalists outside their borders. Other nations, particularly China, seek to intimidate or repress diaspora populations, Olson said. But Iran is consistently focused on actions at the extreme end of transnational repression because of their lethal targeting. Now, Iran, for its part, has dismissed these accusations as Western disinformation, going on to say, the Islamic Republic of Iran harbors neither the intent nor the plan to engage in assassination or abduction operations, whether in the West or any other country. Iran's mission to the United Nations said in a statement, you'd have to say that to the UN, of course, these fabrications are concoctions of this Zionist regime, the Albania-based Mujahideen-e-Khalq terrorist cult, oh my goodness, and, Albania. How did we get to Albania again? And certain Western intelligence services, including those of the United States, to divert attention from the atrocities committed by the Israeli regime. Okay, let's bring them into it too. But the next section here, a surge in attacks, explains what's going on, I think. Iran's overseas operations have intensified in response to a period of political upheaval, driven by mass protests over economic conditions and the regime's treatment of women. The security services in Tehran are targeting those outside the country, whom they accuse of stoking these internal divisions, Western officials and analysts said. So I'm sure from the Iranian perspective, I guess the Iranian government's perspective, they would view Americans giving refuge to dissidents who use things like Iran International Television to beam back what they would deem divisive messaging to the Iranian people is, if not election interference, then political interference in the internal affairs of Iran. But the sort of thing that, the United States has done everywhere, but is also done, we tend to favor that. It's pro-democracy activism, trying to break through the protective shells that repressive regimes build around themselves in order to maintain power, and instead show people the opportunity of adopting democracy. But of course, we do that as our own democracy is degrading and crumbling here. So really all Iran needs to do is say, by the way, they're moving to a fascist authoritarian regime over there, actually. So if you want to be more like Americans, let's do that, which we already have. So they should be letting American news get through undisturbed at this point. But, okay, interesting. And let's see, amid worries that the conflict in Gaza might break out into regional war, Tehran has also been linked to plots against U.S. and Israeli officials and members of Jewish communities in France and Germany. The Justice Department filed charges last month against a Pakistani man with ties to Iran who was accused of seeking to hire a hitman to assassinate political figures in the United States, possibly including former President Donald Trump. That would be a third assassination plot against him, although we heard about that one right around the time of the first one, that they had given warnings to the Secret Service and the local law enforcement there that that threat was surfacing. It was the latest in a series of plots against members of his administration, including former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and former National Security Advisor John Bolton, in response to a 2020 U.S. drone strike in Iraq that killed IRGC leader Qasem Soleimani. You remember that. Security officials and experts said the pace of operations emanating from Iran is unprecedented. Data published by the Washington Institute in August listed 88 assassination, abduction, and other violent plots linked to Iran over the past 5 years, exceeding the total for the preceding 4 decades following the 1979 revolution. They just found a new low-cost provider of assassinations is all. So, of course, there's a market being created for it. At least 14 of those recent cases involved criminal organizations, though. That's the interesting new twist. We're seeing a major escalation in lethal plotting from a government that has used this tactic from the outset, said Matthew Levitt, a counterterrorism expert at the Washington Institute. The results have been mixed. For every plot that has succeeded, others have failed, often because of blunders committed by those hired. Iran appears to accept the downsides of the outsourcing model because of offsetting advantages. These include making it more difficult for authorities to attribute attacks to Tehran, an abundance of criminals willing to commit violence for relatively modest sums of money, and a negligible price of failure. Rather than putting Iran's own agents at risk, a U.S. intelligence analyst said, 2 guys they barely know will spend 20 years in jail. Right, they don't care about that. Zarati, the target of the assassination attempt, the stabbing, 36 years of age, has faced threats since starting his program in 2022 at Iran International, a Saudi-funded satellite, and really, let's just say, it's a Saud family-funded satellite and online news platform that bypasses Iran's censors and beams news and commentary to millions of viewers. In November of 2022, Zarati's wife, a real estate agent, was approached by 2 men on a motorcycle outside a London health club. "We know where you live," one said, according to Zarati. "We will kill your husband." Well, that's the threat. Zarati was one of 5 Iranian journalists whose pictures appeared on wanted dead or alive posters hung from signposts in Iran and circulated widely on social media outlets tied to the government. Here is that collection of posters here in a graphic. Yet the stabbing took place at a time when the threat level facing Iran International was perceived to have declined. The channel had returned from its Washington relocation to new London studios, ringed by blast walls, guard stations, and surveillance cameras. After multiple stays at safe houses, Zarate had returned to his residence, a flat in a 4-story apartment building so close to the famed Wimbledon tennis complex that you can hear the thwack of balls being struck on practice courts. And I don't mean like America's Funniest Home Videos. The assailants appear to have taken advantage of security vulnerabilities. His home address could be found in online property records. That's not smart. His broadcast schedule, one weekly show airing Friday nights, pointed to a predictable commute pattern. And by the way, can I just say that the guy's living in a beautiful flat near Wimbledon, funded by the Saudis, and doing one weekly show on Friday nights only? Like, again, where can I get part of the big grift here? I don't understand how come there's so much money available to people doing things like this. But, and by the way, why are the Saudis funding it? Of course, the competition they're in, ongoing competition, as between Sunni and Shia Islam, and the great centers of that being Saudi Arabia and Iran. So, no surprise there. Zarate, as he crossed the street to his car around 3 p.m. to head to work, tough schedule he's got, he caught sight of a disheveled man approaching him. "Brother, can I have 3 pounds change?" the man said, Zarate recalled in an interview. While Zarate continued towards his car, a second man emerged from a driveway obscured by foliage. The second seized Zarate's arms while the first, smiling broadly, plunged a blade into his leg repeatedly. The decision to stab his thigh rather than his heart or other vital organs led police to believe the attack was intended as a warning. The assailants then raced up the street to meet an accomplice with a car. Zarate's first thought was that he had been mugged, but as he reached for his phone to call an ambulance, he realized that the attackers had not taken any of his belongings, including a wallet, a watch, and a Mont Blanc pen. At that moment, it clicked, Zarate said. It had been related to my job. If the stabbing was meant to silence Zarate and sow fear among the regime's Western critics, it was only partially successful. Zarate returned to the airwaves after a brief hospital stay. "I wanted to send a message that the flow of information in the 21st century can't be stopped," he said. Well, you can be killed, but okay. Other journalists, dissidents, and regime critics acknowledged that they remain deeply shaken. "It sent a chill through my spine," said Alireza Nader, I guess, if you wanted to pronounce it like we do in America, an independent Iran analyst based in Washington. "I look over my shoulder now," he says. "Everybody who is active against the regime, speaks publicly against the regime, felt that attack." British officials have not publicly accused Iran of responsibility. Security officials said they see no alternative explanation, but are still gathering evidence. Iranian officials have said the country was not involved in the stabbing. "We deny any link to this story of this so-called journalist," the country's ambassador to the UK said in a post on Twitter the day after the attack, and now enlisting the Hells Angels. Iran has outsourced assassinations and abductions to at least 5 criminal syndicates, officials said. At the center of this web is an alleged heroin trafficking kingpin based in Iran, Naji Sharifi Zindashti is the guy's name. In a photo here, the U.S. criminal charges made public earlier this year outline an alleged scheme in which Zindashti negotiated a $350,000 contract with 2 Hells Angels members in Canada to kill an Iranian defector and his wife living under false identities in Maryland. In exchanges over encrypted text, the would-be assassins discussed their client's insistence that the slaying be symbolically vicious. One assured the other that he would, quote, "make sure I hit this guy in the head with at least half the clip," according to the U.S. indictment, adding, "we gotta erase his head from his torso." But of course he said clip instead of magazine, and so therefore you know he's not serious. The name of the targeted defector has not been disclosed, but U.S. officials said the individual had served as an officer in the IRGC, a powerful wing of Iran's military created after the 1979 revolution, and then became an informant for the CIA. The incongruous partnership between an Islamic theocracy and a notorious biker gang was driven in part by necessity, officials said, given the resources U.S. security agencies devote to preventing Iran from deploying operatives in the U.S. The Hells Angels, however, has chapters across the country, as well as a powerful grip on narcotics trafficking in Canadian provinces, officials said, and there were previous connections between Iran and the Hells Angels. In another plot, Iran used a German member of the gang, Ramin Yektaparast, maybe, I don't know, who had fled to Tehran to escape murder charges to orchestrate the bombing of a synagogue in Essen. An alleged associate balked at bombing the synagogue but fired shots into its windows. I don't want to do a bomb thing, but I'll go halfway. The point man in the Maryland plot was a, quote, full patch member. I guess that means something to those who understand membership ranks in the Hells Angels. A full patch member named Damian Ryan, who has a string of convictions in Canada for crimes including drug trafficking, assault, robbery, and home invasion, according to court records. Those documents list aliases for him, including Berserker and Mr. Wolf. Got lots of fun aliases to work with there. All right, but a guy who clearly doesn't mind taking money in exchange for possibly going to prison because the prison's full of gang members that he can hang out with, I guess, and he's not leaving much of a life behind. Ryan, 43, in turn enlisted a younger Hells Angels affiliate. Oh, he didn't want to do it himself? Adam R. Pearson, 29, who was in hiding in Minneapolis to escape arrest on murder charges in Canada, according to U.S. and Canadian officials and court records. An attorney representing Ryan declined to comment. Attorneys who have previously represented Pearson did not respond to requests for comment. By March of 2021, the Hells Angels pair had agreed on their six-figure price tag, and Zindashti had sent photos and maps, as well as the initial $20,000 payment to cover travel expenses, according to U.S. indictment. It is unclear how Iran identified the location of the defector, and then, just as it entered its final stage, the plot stalled. The indictment provides no explanation for why Pearson never made the trip to Maryland, but the same month, security services in Europe achieved a breakthrough that rippled through the criminal networks around the world. Zindashti and the two Hells Angels members had been corresponding through an encrypted messaging service known as Sky ECC. Launched by a Vancouver-based company in 2008, the system became a mainstay among criminal syndicates by turning ordinary cell phones into seemingly impenetrable devices, disabling their cameras, microphones, and GPS trackers while adding a kill switch to delete incriminating data. They probably thought that was a good idea at the time. By early 2021, however, Belgian and Dutch security services found a way to breach the network security. On March 9th, Belgian police carried out hundreds of raids, arrested dozens of alleged traffickers, and seized 17 tons of cocaine. Among those taken into custody in Belgium and the Netherlands were members of the Hells Angels. Wasn't it Dutch security that got a hold of the camera footage inside the Russian Internet Research Service troll farms? They're really on the ball over there in Dutch security, unless that was someone else. I don't know. U.S. officials said the Maryland plot came to their attention as investigators sifted through the Sky ECC trove. Pearson was arrested by the FBI in Minnesota and extradited to Canada. In February of 2022, Ryan was arrested following a raid on his house in Ottawa, where authorities found a cache of weapons, body armor, and roughly $95,000 in cash. The next section, a drug lord in Tehran. Zindashti has emerged as a linchpin in Iran's operations. A hulking figure who stands over 6 feet tall and weighs 250 pounds, Zindashti was described by one U.S. intelligence analyst as a Pablo Escobar-type narco-trafficker. Now in his early 50s, Zindashti acquired that status after emerging triumphant from a bloody regional drug war touched off by one of the largest busts in European history. It involved a cargo ship named the Nur 1 that arrived at a Greek port in June of 2014 carrying more than 2 tons of heroin. Just tons of heroin on a ship. Okay. Zindashti was accused by some of tipping off authorities to undercut rivals. He has survived several attempts on his life, but his daughter and a nephew were killed in 2014 by gunmen who pulled up alongside their Porsche Cayenne in Istanbul, mistakenly believing Zindashti was in the vehicle. According to Turkish court records obtained by the Post, a brutal campaign of score settling ensued in which more than a dozen people linked to the Nur 1 deal were killed. One of the murderers had striking parallels to the Hells Angels plot that Zindashti is alleged to have later orchestrated on behalf of Iran's MOIS intelligence service. In May of 2016, a Turkish drug trafficker identified as Çetin Koç, I have no idea how I'm pronouncing it, but I guess all the little diacritic marks might not be on here, but Çetin Koç, perhaps, was gunned down in Dubai. This is a Turkish drug trafficker, gunned down in Dubai by 2 hitmen who had traveled from Canada. Canada is really getting aggressive in all this, where they had links to local narcotics networks. The gunmen became targets themselves upon returning to Vancouver. The bullet-riddled body of one was found in a blueberry field, and the remains of the other were recovered from a burned car, Canadian officials said. I guess that's something to watch out for. You get hired as a hitman. Don't think you're going to get a long time retired with the cash that you earn from your hit. One, you may, if you're lucky, end up in prison, but if you're not, you'll probably just be eliminated by the people who said they were going to pay you, so that you can't turn them in, and they don't have to pay you. In statements to Turkish investigators, Zindashti acknowledged that he had motive to kill Koç, saying that he wrote me threatening messages about 10 days before my daughter's murder. Still, Zindashti claimed to have nothing to do with the murder and dismissed the accusations as a conspiracy. As the killings continued, the target list expanded to include dissidents and journalists branded disloyal by Tehran. In 2017, Saeed Karimian, the founder of the Persian language television network GEM TV, G-E-M, I don't know, it's all caps, so maybe they just say G-E-M, killed in Istanbul, again, by suspects including a man that Zindashti acknowledged had worked for his family's, or as his family's driver. Wow. According to the Turkish court records, in 2019, Masoud Molavi, a dissident who had created a popular Telegram channel that campaigned against corruption in Iran, was killed in Istanbul by an assailant who then hid in one of Zindashti's apartments, according to the Turkish files, which refer to the drug lord as the instigator of multiple attacks. In 2020, Habib Chab, a political activist living in Sweden, was abducted during a visit to Turkey. Watch out for Turkey in all this. And smuggled by Zindashti operatives to Iran, where he was tortured and in 2023 executed, U.S., Western, and Turkish security officials said. Wow. Zindashti's ruthless effectiveness appears to have reignited Iran's enthusiasm for working with criminal syndicates after experiments years earlier ended in failure, officials said. Give us another chance, they said, and they did. In an attempt in 2011 to assassinate the Saudi ambassador, at Cafe Milano, a Georgetown restaurant, unraveled when Iran enlisted a hapless used car salesman from Texas, oh my goodness, the cousin of an official in Tehran, to manage the plot. Well, okay. Taking on these assignments may also have paved the way for Zindashti's return several years ago to his native country after an arrest and other legal problems prompted him to abandon Istanbul. I would get out of there too. The apparent sanctuary provided Zindashti and Yekteparast suggests that Iran's religious hardliners are willing to accommodate criminals who are useful against their enemies, officials said. Yekteparast, who posted photos of his Lamborghini and other luxury trappings on an Instagram account, was killed by unknown assailants in Iran earlier this year. They don't really want to pay you in the end. Cafe Milano was, in hindsight, a signifier of things to come, said a U.S. intelligence analyst, but it was Indashti, the analyst said, who brought a significant shift in terms of realizing this is a lucrative tactic. Iran's security services have poured additional resources into supporting such operations, officials said. The Quds Force, an elite paramilitary wing of the IRGC, established a special unit, Department 840, dedicated to assassination operations outside Iran, U.S. and other officials said. Wow. Zindashti has been more closely aligned since with the MOIS, the intelligence agency, which functions as Iran's main domestic security service, but also has its own assassination branch. Everybody's got one, U.S. officials said. Iranian nationals who oppose the government are considered internal adversaries, officials said, even when residing in others' sovereign territory. That's the key. The U.S. Treasury Department and its UK equivalent imposed financial sanctions on Zindashti, earlier this year, saying that he had conducted assassinations and kidnappings under the direction of the MOIS across multiple continents. Even while taking advantage of Zindashti's international reach, Iran has diversified. A gunman who showed up at the Brooklyn doorstep of Iranian-American journalist Masih Alinejad, in July of 2022, was a member of a sprawling criminal organization known as Thieves in Law. Remember, they were mentioned earlier in this when we read yesterday. The phrase refers to a mafia-style honor code that sworn members are bound to follow. The assailant, Khalid Mediev, but this one spelled Mehdiyev, Mediev, was arrested after being pulled over for a traffic violation near Alinejad's residence. Police found an AK-47, 66 rounds of ammunition, and a ski mask in his vehicle. Not suspicious at all, right? Charges have also been filed against two other suspected thieves-in-law members, alleged to have given Mediev his orders. One was based in Iran, but apprehended in Uzbekistan and turned over to the United States in 2023, officials said. The other was also extradited earlier this year after being arrested in the Czech Republic. They are everywhere. The assassination attempt marked at least the third plot targeting Alinejad, a prominent advocate for women's rights in Iran. One centered on an elaborate scheme to abduct her, escape New York by boat, and board a flight to Iran from Venezuela. Venezuela getting in on the act, according to details released by the U.S. Treasury Department when it imposed sanctions on security operatives in Iran. Alinejad said she spent time in more than a dozen safe houses and that Iran's use of criminals has deepened her concern for her safety. There are a lot of people in Eastern Europe and other places, and it's very easy for them to get a visa and come here to do the job, she said. Next up, we're coming for you. We'll see if we can't complete this piece before we exit today. Iran has used that template repeatedly against Iran International, the satellite station whose journalists have been targets of at least 5 lethal plots. Launched in 2017, the network has built gleaming studios in a London business park and hired hundreds of employees, including prominent broadcasters from BBC Persian and other platforms. Despite negligible advertising revenue, the station spends lavishly on facilities and salaries, reporting losses totaling $569 million between 2017 and 2022, the latest year for which figures are available. That's nothing to the Sauds, of course. Executives declined to provide details of the station's funding except to acknowledge that much of it comes from sources in Saudi Arabia, one of Iran's primary adversaries, as you might say there in the UK. Viewership has surged, fueled by around-the-clock coverage of internal protests during the 2022 uprisings that followed the death of Masha Amini, a 22-year-old woman beaten by police for alleged violations of the country's religious dress code. The network aired coverage of the violent internal crackdown, showing videos of police beatings and other abuses submitted by activists and ordinary citizens. As protests grew, IRGC Commander Hossein Salami Salami, you heard me correctly, issued a thinly veiled threat to the network. We warn those who manage these systems of spreading news and spreading lies for chaos inside our country to stop these behaviors. He said, you've tried us before. Watch out, because we're coming for you. A month later, November of 2022, the station issued a news release saying it had been warned of bomb and death threats against two of its senior managers. Not unlike what's happening in Springfield, as it turns out, for our domestic terrorists. Other plots followed aimed at on-air broadcasters Farazad and Sima Sabet. In February of 2023, police arrested a suspected associate of thieves-in-law who had arrived in London on a flight from Vienna, went straight to Iran International's headquarters, and begun taking videos of its perimeter security. That same month, the channel moved its production operations to an existing Iran International studio in Washington, as we mentioned earlier, and considered safer at the time because of the distance from Tehran and the capabilities of U.S. intelligence agencies. But the thieves-in-law suspect, Magomed Hussein Dovtayev, a 31-year-old native of Chechnya, well, there you have it, was convicted in December of conducting surveillance for an act of terrorism and given a 3.5-year prison sentence. 3 months later, a trio of alleged assailants arrived in London, much as Dovtayev had, on flights from European countries that allow easy entry into Britain. Zarati considers himself more partisan commentator than impartial journalist, and the editorial tone of his weekly Last Word program may have made him a priority target. Several weeks before the stabbing, he had aired an interview with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who used the appearance to denounce the IRGC as a self-designated terrorist organization. Self-designated? I don't think so. Iran's Fars news agency responded by applying the same label to Iran International, calling it a terrorist channel that had offered its antenna to the Prime Minister, murderer of children in Gaza. So you can see the Israel-Iran factor involved in all of that. All right. Well, despite all the efforts to protect Zarati, they did get to him. This is a huge problem and growing. Just something I thought I'd put on your plate to worry about between now and, the rest of your life.
Radio.com.
I'm sorry about that.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, let's see whether Justice plans to lighten the mood at all with the Netroots Radio's next feature, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Let's see, the most hateful mind in presidential history. No, not lighter at all. Wants everybody else to tone down the rhetoric. Yeah, that's the message they're going with now. We'll see whether that one sticks. Let's make sure it doesn't. Tune in next.